that reason. Rather than keep searching for a new Lon Chaney, Tod Browning took a more sensational step. He cast his next film not with actors wearing makeup to look disfigured and crippled, but with sideshow performers whose twisted shapes and missing limbs were grimly real. The film was Freaks.
Tod Browning's most outrageous movie is Freaks. Nobody could top that.
Freaks, I think, is one of the great films of all time. Again, because it breaks all the rules.
I just saw Freaks the other night. I couldn't sit through it. I couldn't do it.
One of the most interesting phenomena in Hollywood, the beginning of the Great Depression, was the sudden popularity of horror movies. And Universal got the ball rolling with Dracula, which Browning, of course, directed, as well as Frankenstein, and Paramount did Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and MGM wanted to get on the bandwagon. And Irving Thalberg, who was the head of production there, basically got it into his mind that MGM would, produce the horror movie to end all horror movies. And they let Tod Browning loose on the project, and what they ended up was doing Freaks.
Tod Browning was the type of a director that would leave the professionals alone. And that on Freaks, you're dealing with a carload of unprofessionals who are coming in, who have the stigma of not looking normal to the great majority of other people at the studio. And he tried his best to be father figure to those people and to guide them through the roles and make the experience for them as pleasant as possible.
Audiences shunned Freaks. The illusion of Lon Chaney pretending to be armless and legless was one thing, but the sight of a real armless and legless wonder lighting a cigar with his teeth was quite another. Freaks drew heavy fire from state censor boards and critics all across the country.
Here was a film that was banned in England for 30 years. Many cities where it played or tried to play wouldn't allow the film to be shown. Censor boards, which were very popular back then, would ban this film altogether.
We were told by one of the MGM executives at the time that they had a preview in San Diego in which a woman ran screaming up the aisles and then threatened to sue MGM on the grounds that the film had given her a miscarriage. And so the film was kind of quietly taken out of circulation, and MGM did not really reclaim the rights until decades later.
You empathize very strongly with the little midget in that movie. He manages to really, even though the other characters are so strange, you realize after a while that they're the good guys of this movie. And it's the normal people, supposedly normal people, who are the ones that are the true monsters. So it's a brilliant film.
The most interesting innovation of Freaks was that they were using real freaks. The studio was in a big to do about this. I mean, you were having lunch with the half man who had nothing below his torso. People were not able to eat really around these folks, and they eventually put them off in their own tent. But the whole production of this thing was really monumental. I mean, the studio, the other producers at the studio trying to shut this thing down, and Thalberg and Browning trying to keep it afloat. It is true that it's a miracle that it ever got made.
It was a box office failure, which MGM quickly pulled from release and shelved for years. The failure of Freaks was a calamity from which Browning's career never quite recovered. He'd been ahead of his time with this one, the first great exploitation picture of the talkie era, and the Bible on a conceptual level for every fringe and exploitation filmmaker ever since.
The only real exploitation film that he did was Freaks. The other one were really horror films. And exploitation only because of people's reaction to it and what they called it.
Browning was never able to go quite as far again. In fact, he began looking backward and rehashing material he'd used before, although he tried to spice it up a bit. He remade London After Midnight as Mark of the Vampire, adding a subplot involving incest, but the scenes were cut out by the studio prior to the film's release.
Danger stalks through the night. No one is safe. Their fury would follow us to the ends of the earth. No, we must destroy them all together. Scourge of mankind, they shall be found.
Mark of the Vampire.
His next thriller, The Devil Doll, a loose adaptation of A. Merritt's novel Burn Witch Burn, was highlighted by marvelous special effects. But the story itself was little more than a throwback to Browning's most popular Lon Chaney film, The Unholy Three, which the team had made in 1925. Even Lionel Barrymore's master criminal in drag disguise was a reprise of Chaney's makeup in The Unholy Three.
In a sensational statement by the prefect of police today, it was admitted that Paul Levon, former bank president, convicted of looting his own bank and killing a watchman, escaped from prison 4 months ago.
Thank you 1,000 times, monsieur. You'll never know how happy it makes me to leave one of my dolls in your beautiful home.
There's something in this house. This is an authentic little replica itself. Isn't it?
Hero! Whatever you are, in God's name, listen and have mercy. I'll confess.
The once vaunted Tod Browning, the cinema's master of sinister sensation, had become just one more hard-working stiff on the Hollywood assembly line.
Browning's legacy is the cinema of alienation, the cinema of the outsider. You know, whether the outsider is a criminal or a cripple or a supernatural vampire from Transylvania. It is this sense of social isolation, and then the anger and frustration of that isolation. And this is essentially the story he told over and over and over again. And I think that accounts for why his films have not lost any of their fascination.
I think you'll see that he was a good craftsman, came in, did his job, and went home, and he made some solid-made pictures that still hold an interest.
Tod Browning made his last film, Miracles for Sale, in 1939. It was a murder mystery with a magic show background. His instincts for sensation hadn't quite left him, however. For several years, he tried to get MGM to back a film version of Horace McCoy's taboo-breaking novel about the Depression, They Shoot Horses, Don't They? But it was not to be. In 1941, Tod Browning retired from the movie business, and he refused to discuss his career publicly for the remainder of his life.